a big pleasure for me to being here and receiving in Colombia Dr. Jane Goodall, who is one of the most important references of what we are calling in Colombia peace with nature. You have dedicated your whole life to understand better nature, to relate to nature with different value system. And we would like to first welcome you and say thank you for all that legacy and all that work for so many years.
Thank you. But it was, I decided when I was 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to go to Africa, live with wild animals and write books about them. And it's moved on from there. So all my life, I've wanted to be with animals and nature.
So you had a very strong purpose since very young that happily you were able to unfold.
Yes.
During your life.
Yes. And I had an amazing mother who supported this passion when everybody else laughed at me.
It was many years ago when the way society perceived animals and the mainstream thinking was more seeing them first as creatures that were less than us, so we were superior.
Yeah.
And second, also, as we were dominant, our aim was to dominate nature. So how was, especially for a young woman at the time, to start working from another perspective, and how have you seen that change in so many decades?
Yeah, well, I began studying with chimpanzees in 1960. Nobody had done it.
Wow.
And I hadn't been to college because we couldn't afford it. So I was just basically put out in nature with a pencil and notebook and a pair of not very good binoculars in the Gombe National Park in Tanzania. And I'd been with the chimpanzees about 2 years. And they're our closest living relatives.
Yes.
And when I got to Cambridge, my mentor said there's no time for an undergraduate degree. He plunged me into a PhD.
Wow.
You can imagine I was nervous. Imagine how I felt when I was told I'd done everything wrong. Chimpanzees should have numbers, not names. You cannot talk about their personality. You can't talk about them having a mind capable of solving problems. And you certainly can't talk about them having emotions, happiness, sadness, fear. But I'd already been taught as a child by my dog that was rubbish. So I just went on talking about them the way they are. And luckily I got a very good supervisor. And then the National Geographic sent out a photographer, filmmaker. And so his film vindicated what I'd said. And so since the chimps basically broke down that barrier between us and other animals. Because back then, 1961, science actually said that we were totally separate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And especially with such a close relative of Homo sapiens.
Yes, we share 98.7% of our DNA with them. And they kiss, they embrace, they hold hands, they pat one another, they beg for food, they do everything. And that males will stand upright and swagger and, when they're competing for dominance. And I'm sure that gives you some idea of, anyway.
Not very different from what we see in human males sometimes, isn't it?
You said it.
It's true. So we are organizing COP16 in Cali, Colombia. It's the first time Colombia takes a challenge of doing an UN meeting of this sort and at this size. And governments will come to discuss about how to protect biodiversity. But at the same time, we are in a world which is with so many tensions politically, socially, and with so many difficulties to even make peace within us, that asking for peace with nature as the main calling of the Colombian government seems a little bit big. What keeps you now that you have walked all this long walk and have seen the changes? What do you see as sources of hope for the future, even with this very critical environmental and political and social crisis we are living in?
Yes, and particularly now with those two terrible wars in Ukraine and in Gaza.
Yeah,
that makes it really tough. Mm-hmm. But, basically I've got 4 reasons for hope. And the first, we have this program for we have this program called Roots and Shoots. And its main message is each one of us can make an impact every day, and we can choose what sort of impact we make. And every group of these young people, which is now in 70 countries,
Wow.
including Colombia, where we're trying to grow more quickly, they do 3 projects, one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment. And also learning, because we bring them together whenever possible, that more important than the color of our skin, our language, our culture, even our religion, is the fact we're all human. So we're basically a human family. And my reasons for hope are, one, these young people from kindergarten through university, and even adults, they are, once they understand the problem and we empower them to take action, they get to choose what to do. So they choose things they're passionate about, and there's no stopping them. And as we speak now, you and I, around the world, there are young people planting trees, they're clearing trash, they're influencing their parents, some of whom may be decision makers. And because we began in 91, we already have some of them, ex-Roots and Shoots, in decision-making positions.
Sure. And
And they carry with them, the values of respect and love and compassion and courage and determination. So they're my greatest source of hope. And then there's this brain of ours. And isn't it weird that the creature with the most intellect is destroying its only home? It doesn't make sense. But we're beginning to start bringing people together, like in COP16, to try and solve some of these problems. And, so our brain is another source of hope if we use it wisely. And then thirdly, nature is so resilient. So you can totally destroy a place, and with time and perhaps some help, nature will return. And first it'll be the plants, and then the insects and the birds. And animals on the brink of extinction can be given another chance. It's happening all the time. I wrote a whole fat book about it. And
Wow.
since then, more animals are being rescued. And then finally, there's what I call the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle what's impossible and won't give up, and so often succeed. So those are my 4 main reasons for hope. But you're right, we've got to tackle corruption, we've got to tackle greed, we've got to tackle unsustainable lifestyle, and we've got to tackle poverty, because people in poverty destroy the environment to survive.
Yes, and of course also there is a power struggle, like of a lot of vested interest. But it's very interesting because as a species, I think it's probably we can say it's the first time that one single species is having such an impact on the whole web of life. But the most surprising thing is at the same time we are conscious and we can see with all the science and technology we have created that we are doing it. And we can even project to the future what will happen if we continue doing it.
Yeah, we're doomed.
Yeah.
If we carry on like this.
Yeah. But it's amazing that we are able to understand it, to see it, to project it.
Yep.
And I hope, thank you for that those 4 sources of hope will also be very strong pillars for COP16, where actually we also want to bring whole of government, whole of society to mobilize.
Yeah.
Probably what you are describing is a mobilization of action, no? Like in
action.
concrete terms.
Hope isn't just wishful thinking. Hope is about action. I see our species, we're like at the mouth of a very, very long, dark tunnel. And right at the end of that tunnel is a little star shining. That's hope. But it's no good just sitting and, it'll be all right. No, we've got to roll up our sleeves and crawl under, climb over, work around all these obstacles. Climate change, loss of biodiversity, poverty, unsustainable lifestyles, pollution, and then our meat eating now. I think Colombia probably suffers from too many cattle. And it's not only the fact that the methane gases add to the greenhouse gases, but in addition to that, we now know, I mean, pigs are as intelligent as dogs.
Yes.
I know a pig called Pig Casso, and she paints with her mouth.
No way.
Yes, and her biggest painting, and she loves it.
Wow.
Her biggest painting has sold for $25,000. And they're beautiful. She just does, like this, and it's just super duper. And then rats have a bad reputation, right? Well, the giant forest rat of Africa has been trained, and I've watched them being trained. They can detect landmines buried deep under the ground after a long African civil war. They've more or less themselves cleared landmines in Mozambique.
Wow.
They detect them with scratching, and then somebody comes along to dig up and defuse the bomb. Now
Wow.
they're being taught, the problem with trafficking animals and
Yes.
animal parts? Well, because they're so small, they can do better than dogs. They can climb up the containers in the ports and the airports to sniff out rhino horn, elephant tusk, pangolin scales, whatever it is. And also after an earthquake, they can go down in the rubble and
To find
if there's anybody
people.
living. And they're absolutely adorable. They live 9 years. And I don't know, they're just very, very special.
You have highlighted with that one of the concepts we want to give to Peace with Nature is to see nature as our main ally, to be able to transcend this or try to stabilize the situation on climate, the crisis of the 21st century, and stop seeing nature as a resource, but seeing it as a force that we need to empower and let empower. I remember during COVID how, as we shut down for a while and people went to quarantine, immediately nature appeared, in cities, in places where it has not been seen for a long time.
That's what I said, it's resilient.
It's very resilient.
But I mean, I think the thing is, people have become separated from nature. And we've got to realize we are not only part of nature, we depend on it for food, clothing, water, shade, everything. But we are dependent on healthy ecosystems.
Right.
And I see an ecosystem as like a beautiful tapestry. And it's this interdependent mix of plant and animal species. And every time a species disappears from that ecosystem, it's pulling a thread from the tapestry. So if you pull enough threads, the tapestry will hang in tatters, the ecosystem will collapse, and that is what is happening.
And with it, people, of course, as well, will collapse. Communities that depend on those functions. Huh?
And then you get the terrible refugee situation and the migrant situation, which for the people are just treated like, I don't know.
So somehow it is convenient for us, if even seen from a very selfish perspective, it is convenient for us to make peace with nature, because it will be enhancing our own well-being
in the future. Yes.
In the future.
Yes, certainly if you care about your children. And there was one head of corporation. I was speaking to a group of CEOs, and he said, it's very noisy.
Airplanes.
Yeah. He told me, he said, Jane, I promise you, for 8 years, I've really been trying to get my corporation more sustainable, to get our products more ethically sourced in the countries where we work. Along the supply chain, difficult, but we're trying in our offices around the world, and the way we treat our customers. And he said there were 3 reasons. One, I saw the writing on the wall. I saw that in some places we're using up natural resources more quickly than nature can replenish them, and some which cannot be replenished once they're gone. Secondly, consumer pressure. People are beginning to ask questions. How was this made? Did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals, like intensive animal farming? Is it cheap because of unfair wages or even slave labor? If so, they're starting not to buy it. Will they pay a little bit more for something ethically sourced? Well, they will then value it more and waste less, because waste is another huge problem. We waste food, and right out here, there are people on the street
Dying.
with nothing.
That's right.
And then, but he said, what tipped the balance for me was my little girl. She was 10 years old. She came home from school one day and she said, Daddy, they tell me that what you're doing is harming our planet. That's not true, is it, Daddy? Because it's my planet.
Wow. Yes,
And that's to me, when I'm meeting people, you know, people in government, not like you, but people who want to go on, you know, subsidizing oil and gas rather than subsidizing solar power, for example. And it's no good arguing with them because they're not going to listen. Not somebody like me. Stories. Find a story that reaches the heart. And that story about that CEO and his little girl, I found it's very powerful.
It is very powerful, and you have to respond to the next generation because there is a difference. It's not about future generations, it's about the generation that is already here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are conscious, they are understanding that. Finally, you know, as a woman, I guess maybe you have observed something I have observed, at least here in Colombia, and is that when I'm seeing communities defending their territories, defending ecosystems, I always, or almost all the time, see a woman in front of the struggle or of the good actions. What do you think is the role of women in caring for the planet?
Well, I think, you know, if you take our role through evolution, it's been a role of nurturing. Mm-hmm. Women have the babies, and they've got a long time to nurture them into decent human beings. And of course, there are some communities that they can't really do much because they don't have any money. They use up their land, but providing a woman actually is in a reasonable environment, you know, she's got, I think she has a nurturing streak that she's inherited and brought all the way through our long evolutionary process. Certainly with animals, it's true. Female animals will go to all lengths to defend their young. And we can think into the future. So we can think what's going to happen to these children. And that's why I think women are leading, because they've got this inherited, you know, nurturing streak that's thinking into the future.
Yeah, not only the short term. And finally, if you would like to say a message to all the people that are interested in the biodiversity COP that probably will come to Colombia, what would be the message that you will leave them?
Well, I think the most important message would be, first of all, that every day you live, you make an impact. Choose your impact wisely. And secondly, try to understand that if we continue to destroy nature and don't do something about CO2 emissions and methane emissions, then if we care about our children or our grandchildren or anybody's children, if we care about wildlife, if we care about our dogs, our cats, whatever, you know, if we don't do something to slow down climate change and loss of biodiversity, because those two are intertwined, we're doomed.
Yes, it's true.
So we have to do something. We must.
See, yes. It's the time to act.
Yes, and you know, the other thing is people are very disparaging about the COPs. They say, yes, lots of talk, lots of promises, but we're still not meeting our goal. But imagine without the COPs where we'd be. We'd probably have gone beyond point of no return.
Yeah, for sure. It's a hard process, but we are trying to make this people's COP so that we can face these contradictions, talk about them, have partnerships, coalitions, inspiring messages such as this. Thank you so much, Jane, for your time and this opportunity to talk to you and to understand these very deep messages that we like to carry forward towards COP16 but beyond, because they will be absolutely relevant for the rest of the 21st century.
Well, with a minister like you, I think this COP is going to be very successful.
And one of those young ones of the 90s.
Yes, yes, and some of our young people from Roots and Shoots, because they get it. And
yes.
They are inspirational.
For sure, they'll move mountains.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.